Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your audio amigo, here today with another showcase video for y'all. This time we're looking at an interesting DAC and IEM combo from Qudelix. This is the Qudelix T71 DAC, and these are the T71 IEMs. They're priced at $230 each, making this combo $460 together. The IEMs are getting included here because they literally only work with this specific DAC. And while this might look like a normal USB-C connector and USB-C port, they're actually wired in a very specific way, and they aren't compatible with anything else. They're just using the USB-C connector as a connector and nothing else. So, are these worth the asking price, or are they just another also-ran in the DAC and IEM space? Let's take a closer look. Real quick, I'd just like to give a shout out once again to my good buddy Jaytiss. He sent me both the DAC and the IEM out for review. As I mentioned before, he's a fellow YouTuber. He does some awesome reviews on his channel. As usual, I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. Please go check him out. Thanks again for sending me this. Really appreciate it. Okay, so let's get started with the box contents. If you own the Q5K, you'll immediately recognize the packaging for the T71. It's the same minimalist cardboard packaging that the 5K comes in. You get the DAC inside along with a C to C cable and a type A to C cable. You also get a little card that shows you what the buttons do, what the buttons are for, and so on. And that's basically it for this. There is a carry case for the T71 available. It's sold separately for $10. It's sort of a magnetic ring arrangement. So if you have a phone that has a magnetic ring attachment system, this just slides in there rather nicely. And there we go. And yeah, it'll stick onto the back of your phone, and you can carry it along that way. As far as the IEM goes, it also comes in a plain cardboard box, but you get a little bit more inside. You get this really nice blue magnetic carry case with plenty of room for the IEMs on the inside. You also get 6 sets of ear tips, which are these. You get small, medium, and large of what look to be like a black version of what I think are CP100 spin fit ear tips. They come in a little branded spin fit bag. And you get some hybrid ear tips. They're sort of silicone on the outside and foam on the inside. They remind me a lot of the Zoltech hybrid ear tips. And yeah, that's basically it. Since the cable on the IEMs is permanently attached, and it doesn't use a standard connector, there are no modular connectors to be had here. So overall, the accessories here are pretty bare, but honestly, it's just what you need to get going, and functionality is what matters here. Since I'm covering 2 items here, I'll be brief about the included cables. The one for the IEM is a basic 2-wire twist with a metal Y-split and chin slider. The Y-split, as you can see, is branded with the AME logo on it. Cable feels nice in the hands. The chin slider is fully functional once you get it where it needs to go, and yeah, it's pretty nice. At the connector end, as I've described, this is a non-standard USB-C port. You've got the AME branding and the T71 IEM on the other side. The connector feels nice and solid. Overall, it's a very nice cable. The ear hooks are soft. They don't cause any pain on the ears. The cables themselves aren't microphonic. The attachment point here for the cable onto the IEM looks like it comes off, but obviously it does not. It's got a bit of flex to it, which means it's a nice solid strain relief. That's a good thing because, if this cable fails, you can't change it out. So it's nice that they've taken appropriate strain relief measures for the design here. As far as the cables that come with the DAC go, the C to C cable is basically the perfect length. They're both this sort of braided or wire twist design. Like I said, the C to C cable is the perfect length, in my opinion, for going from a phone into the DAC, especially if it's hanging off the back of your phone with this magnetic case. It works fantastic. I think it's great. I wish the type A to C cable was longer. I did use this as a desktop DAC for a good amount of time in my testing, and this cable was basically useless. I had to use my own cable, hook it up to my computer. So yeah, other than the fact that I wish this cable was longer, I think the cables here are nice quality. They're fitting for the quality of the DAC, and I think they're rather nice. So let's talk about the design and construction. The T71 is a pretty small DAC, all things considered, which is good since it's portable. It definitely is bigger than like your standard dongle DAC. I have the Awful Snowy Night here, and you can see it's definitely larger, but it's also smaller than some other portable DACs like the Cord Mojo or the Topping G5, for example. Uh, a tour of the unit. Here on this side, you've got the input for the USB-C connector. I'll go ahead and plug that in to help guide the rest of the experience. That's the input side. Here you have the output side. You've got 3.5 millimeter single-ended, and you've got 2.5 and 4.4 millimeter balanced. This USB-C output is wired so that it will only work with the T71 IEM, so don't try plugging anything else into that. It will not work. On the bottom here, we've got a couple of buttons. We've got orange and green on there, and on the top, we've got blue and red. Those, in combination with this screen here, help you navigate the UI. You use these top two buttons to sort of go between the screens, and then you use the bottom ones to sort of make a selection as to what you're going to be doing there. So you can see me navigating the menus there. This is the main screen. This will tell you what your volume level is at. This will tell you which speakers in the 7.1 surround chain are actually being utilized. That's your bit rate. That's what output you had plugged in. You can see I had 4.4 plugged in just before this. That's your output voltage. That tells you, 7.1 channel mode, and that's your battery indicator. This does have a 1,000 milliamp hour battery to not cause any drain on your smartphones or other devices. Also on the face of the unit here are a couple of MEMS microphones that sound like this. And then on the bottom, you've got this metal housing. Feels very sturdy overall. Feels very well built. It's about the build quality I would expect from Qudelix. They do a good job here. I'm going to briefly go over the IEM's design and construction. These are full 3D printed resin shells with a resin top plate. The nozzles, as you can see, are printed as part of the lower shell and don't feature any filters or mesh or protectors on the ends, so just be careful with getting debris on those. In terms of ventilation, the only vent is here over next to where the cable is attached. Despite that, I didn't have any pressure buildup issues with these, but again, I'm not super sensitive to those problems. If you are, you might have an issue since there's no front vent. Outside of that and the sort of taller than normal design, these feel sturdy in the hands. Like I said, the attachment point for the cable has good flex to it, so it shouldn't wear out. I think these are solid and should last a good long while. Okay, specifications. 2 products, 2 spec pages. We'll go ahead and start off with the one for the DAC. So this is a quad DAC implementation using 4 ESS Sabre 9219 DACs. Those are tied to a pair of Texas Instruments INA 1620 amp chips. And all of the DSP wizardry is done by an ARM Cortex M33 processor with a Cadence Tensilica Hi-Fi coprocessor. To improve mobile phone battery life, as I've mentioned, it has an internal 1,000 milliamp hour battery, sort of reduces power draw from your DAP or mobile phone. You can isolate the battery in settings to improve life and preserve the function if you're using it in desktop mode. In terms of output power, Qudelix claims 8 volts of output on the balanced connections. I had no issues driving my SJY Moonlights with these, and those are very power-hungry headphones. I did have to push the T71 quite high in terms of volume, but it didn't necessarily require me to switch into high gain mode, which is a very good thing. At those higher volumes, there was no distortion, and it was happily driving the Moonlights, and it even had a little bit of headroom left. That means it should basically drive most headphones and IEMs with no issues. Moving on to the specs for the IEMs, you have 4 drivers per side, an 8mm dynamic, and 3 Sony balanced armatures. They don't tell me exactly what model number. This is a different setup compared to most IEMs in that these are sort of emulating a surround sound setup in your ears. Instead of sending the full signal to the IEM and then having an internal crossover network that filters the frequencies for each driver, the DAC is actually sending individual signals to each driver, with each driver wired separately and directly to the DAC. That is why they had to use that USB C connector. With those 8 drivers, you need 10 separate wires to wire each one, and the USB C connector with all of its pins and sort of durability was chosen for that task. According to the software, the DD handles everything under 160 Hz. The BA takes over from there right up to about 1.5 kilohertz. Then the second BA does 1.5 kilohertz to 6.5 kilohertz, leaving the third and final BA to do everything, 6.5 kilohertz and above. The software here is actually really cool. It lets you mute individual drivers, which I think is pretty neat. Go put on some music and then just pull up the software and turn off drivers one by one and see how the music changes. It's really fun to play with, especially while you're tweaking your EQ settings. Since the IEM is tied to the DAC, the impedance sensitivity don't really matter, as the DAC will always power the IEM as well. One thing to note here, my weight numbers for the IEMs include the DAC, since you can't use the IEMs without the DAC. Quick note on the user experience, I mostly use the Chrome extension app to manage the DAC here. It worked very well for me. There was a little bit of weirdness reading the manual on the Qudelix website, as it's mainly all in Korean, but a quick page translation on the browser yielded some excellent results, and I was able to use all the settings just fine. As soon as I fired up the Chrome extension, it handled any firmware updates for me, no problem. And after that was done, I was able to access all the settings on the device with no issues whatsoever. Some of the sections on the site, like the DSP tab with the separate settings for speaker EQ and user EQ, and some of the settings for the battery, are a little bit unintuitive unless you've read the manual. But reading the manual did clear up any confusion, and it was overall fine. I do wish they had little tooltips that pop up when you hover over an option to give you a quick description of what that does. Would have been a bit helpful. Reading the manual did tell me that EQ settings you apply to the user EQ first, and then the speaker EQ. So you have like two separate EQs going on. The speaker EQ applies to the output, and the user EQ applies to the input, and they sort of work together, or either or. But they say you should use the user EQ first. The speaker EQ has 5 presets that you can change yourself, and that's 5 presets per output. So you have 5 for the 2.5, 3.5, 4.4, and the T71 output. So that's technically 20 if you're using a modular connector, and only 15 if you're not using the T71 IEM. As far as the user EQ goes, you have 10 custom presets there, so 15 total, and you can combine them in a bunch of different ways. Each preset is 10 band EQ, so if you combine the 10 for the user and the 10 for the speaker, you have 20 bands of EQ if you stack them. Overall, the EQ and the whole user experience, in my opinion, with the Chrome app was extremely polished. Like I said, it could use some tooltips, maybe a frequently asked questions section or a link to the manual on there, but overall, I think it's honestly fine. Just people who aren't used to PEQ could use a bit more of a hand-holding approach, if you know what I mean. So let's talk about sound. This is going to be interesting for 2 reasons. First of all, the DAC. I did A/B this with my other DAC amp combo. This is my first experience with ESS DAC chips, and from what I've read online, I was expecting some of the typical ESS, analytical brightness that I've, been reading about. Honestly, I used my Edition XS on these, and it didn't come across as piercing or overly analytical. It was maybe a tiny bit brighter compared to my FiiO K7. It has AKM chips, but honestly, it could have just been placebo. It could have just been, the testing that I was doing at the time. Both the K7 and the T71 use Texas Instruments amplification chips, so maybe that explains why I didn't hear that much of a difference, but again, I don't have a lot of experience here. It sounded just fine. I didn't have any complaints with the sound. It was really, really nice on everything I put on it. As far as the IEMs are concerned, this was a very strange one. I'm going to pull up the graph on these. I had 2 use cases for these IEMs. I used them with music, and I used them with movies. As you can see, the stock sound signature here is a little odd. It's a very hard U-shaped signature. You've got that big bass shelf and the big treble shelf, and sort of recessed sounding mid-range as a result. The other thing that sounded off to me here is that, understandably so, the drivers together aren't very coherent. They sound very separated, very individual compared to other multi-driver hybrid IEMs that I've tried at this price point. So yeah, it's not the most coherent sounding hybrid IEM for sure. Considering this IEM is tied to this DAC, I went ahead and EQ'd it to a ton of different IEMs that I've measured. Highlights would be I did the Mega 5 EST bass, the Performer 7, and the Awful Magic 1. While this won't perfectly emulate those IEMs as the driver configurations are different, it did help with the overall sound of the IEM for music, and while I still found it lacking in coherency, the new tunings did help mask that issue a little bit. Overall, I don't think music is this IEM's strong suit necessarily. It will do the job fine, but for the price, I think you might be a bit disappointed. Where I think this IEM absolutely shines, though, is in content that is actually mastered in 7.1 or 5.1 channel audio. When you see all of those labels down here light up that all of the channels are getting audio, this IEM absolutely sings. I watched Lord of the Rings, Return of the King in full 7.1 Dolby Vision with the Dolby Atmos soundtrack on here, and it was absolutely amazing. Many of the spatial effects that I expected from the surround sound actually came through on the IEM quite well. Was it on the same level as my dedicated home theater setup? No, but it was, I would say a magnitude better than the fakey simulated 7.1 that some software on other, DACs or, movie watching software can emulate. It was way, way better. The spatial effects were there when you used normal headphones and IEMs, not the T71, but the T71 IEM was a noticeable step up in terms of surround sound experience, even compared to things like, the Mega 5 EST or the Performer 7. Overall, the DAC is an impressive bit of kit with some great software to help you unlock tuning possibilities with whatever you plug into it. The IEM is a bit of a specialist. For music, it's fine, but I think where it shines the most is playing content that's actually mastered for surround sound, as hearing the drivers as separate speakers matches the experience here better. So, time for recommendations. We'll go ahead and start off with the DAC. The T71, as I mentioned, is a pretty powerful bit of kit. It has a nice set of features that are easy to configure and use. The user interface is honestly very easy to navigate once you get used to it. The buttons are sturdy and the different colors are useful for figuring out what you're doing in a low light environment. The screen gives you all the pertinent information when it's in use. The audio performance is excellent, and the DSP implementation is extremely powerful and easy to take advantage of. Importing profiles via text file from Squiglink or someone else's equalizer presets are very easy to do. The only thing that this is missing, in my opinion, is Bluetooth. It's honestly a bit of a head scratcher as to why the T71 doesn't have Bluetooth. You have the battery, so having Bluetooth on this would have made this a logical sort of step up from the Q5K. Without Bluetooth, however, I think it will be a bit difficult to talk existing Q5K owners into upgrading to the T71. That, however, is not necessarily where I think the T71 is competitive. It's not trying to be an upgrade to the Q5K. It feels to me like this is going after things like the Topping G5, the Chord Mojo 2, the iFi Hip DAC, for example. Compared to all of those, the T71 is smaller, and while I haven't listened to the competition for long periods of time personally, the powerful DSP implementation on this is something that you're not going to find on the other three, and honestly, it's enough for me to recommend it. If you're looking at something like the Topping G5 or the iFi Hip DAC, but you want something that has an extremely robust DSP solution baked into it, the T71 is a great alternative. And while it might not have the power output of the other units, I found that this was plenty of power for even the most difficult to drive headphones in my collection, and because of that, this is going to get a recommendation from me. The T71 IEM, however, is a completely different story. I can't really recommend it as a straight-up music IEM unless your library is entirely 5.1 or 7.1 channel DSD files. I do have a handful of 5.1 DSD files, and they did sound really nice through this. Again, not as nice as on my 7.1 home theater setup, but better than most other IEMs that are just being downmixed. I do see a really niche use case for this, though, and I got a little bit of a taste on it on my recent Christmas trip. If you are an international businessman who does a lot of long haul, over ocean flying, I think this might actually be worth a look for you. The T71 DAC and IEM paired with, say, a nice laptop with a 4K OLED screen would make for an amazing travel setup on those long haul flights. If you load up some 4K Blu-ray rips, you essentially have a portable 7.1 surround sound theater with you on the airplane. I took this with me. I watched Lord of the Rings in Dolby Vision on the airplane, and it was an awesome experience. I could totally see a frequent flyer or a salesman who's always on airplanes and who really loves movies splurging on this combo just to make movies on an airplane that much more immersive. For normal folks, though, unless you're really, really into the surround sound, DSD music scene, this IEM is going to be a bit of a hard sell. It's a very specialized IEM, and I don't think that most people out there are set up to take full advantage of what this is capable of. This is a great technical showcase. It's awesome what can be accomplished with some creative engineering and the right combination of drivers and DSP. I just don't think that the average consumer with sort of this budget will be looking at something like this. But that's going to wrap this one up. The T71 DAC is great, and the T71 IEM is a interesting little tech demo IEM with a very specialized surround sound party piece. Once again, big thank you and shout out to Jaytiss for sending me this for review. I really, really appreciate it. That's going to be it for now. I appreciate all of your continued support. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Omar with AudioAmigoReviews, and I'll catch y'all next time.